So was that first strike against Iran a brilliant strategic move by the Trump administration, or was it one of the biggest miscalculations in modern history, one that has dragged the U.S. into a war it wasn't ready for and frankly has no idea how to end?
Okay, let's really get into this, because that is the huge question we're trying to unpack today. On paper, the plan probably looked simple, but the reality, it's anything but. The whole conflict has just spiraled into something way more dangerous than anyone seemed to predict, and it's looking less like a quick win and more like, you guessed it, another forever war.
And this is the grim picture on the ground just 4 days in. U.S. and Israeli airstrikes are pounding Tehran, the same city they talked about liberating. In return, Iran has just unleashed a storm of missiles on Israel and its neighbors in the Gulf. In the middle of all this chaos, the U.S. is telling its citizens to get out, but with no real plan on how they're supposed to do that. And the human cost is already climbing. We have 6 U.S. soldiers confirmed dead, and everyone expects that number to go up. And just tragically in Iran, a school bombing has killed over 160 civilians, most of them young girls. Instead of sparking a revolution like some predicted, it sparked mass mourning. This isn't some limited strike. This is a full-blown crisis.
So to try and make sense of this chaos, we're going to break it down. We're going to tackle the 5 key questions that pretty much the whole world is asking right now. What's the real reason for this war? Did the U.S. get dragged into this by Israel? How is a superpower struggling so much? What is the deal with Saudi Arabia? And maybe the most important question of all, how on earth does this end?
Let's start with the absolute basics, right? The most fundamental question. Why is the U.S. even at war? Because, well, if you've been listening to the administration, the answer seems to change pretty much every day.
What's just wild is watching how the official story has completely crumbled day by day. On day 1, it was all about stopping Iran's nuclear program. Then, day 2, suddenly the goalpost moved to regime change. Day 3, it was scaled back to just degrading missile capabilities. Day 4, it was about protecting Iran's neighbors. And by day 5, well, the reason became truly mind-bending.
And here you have it. Senator Marco Rubio basically spelled it out. The U.S. attacked Iran to stop Israel from attacking Iran, which would then have caused Iran to attack the U.S. Just let that sink in for a second. The official justification is that America started a war to prevent a chain of events that would have led to a war. It's a pretzel logic that even members of Congress are calling incomplete, unsubstantiated, and, in their words, a lie.
So that confusing justification has poured fuel on a really powerful and politically explosive theory, which brings us to our second question. Is this even America's war at all?
And you can just see the backlash building even from deep within Trump's own base. You have staunch supporters like Marjorie Taylor Greene who feel completely betrayed. I mean, they voted for a candidate who promised to end stupid wars, not to jump headfirst into a new one without any clear strategy. Now they're accusing the administration of being a bunch of sick liars fighting for another country's interests.
And look, this isn't just some fringe opinion. Polling from both CNN and Reuters shows this war is deeply unpopular. Only 30% of Americans are on board with it, while a massive 60% disapprove. If this thing doesn't get resolved, and fast, it's not just a foreign policy crisis for Trump, it's shaping up to be a full-blown crisis for his presidency.
Okay, so you've launched an unpopular war with a confusing motive, but hey, you've got the might of the U.S. military, so you'd expect a quick, decisive campaign, right? Well, it turns out it looks like America was only prepared for a fight that was going to last a few days, not a few weeks.
This was the message from President Trump, that America has a bottomless well of weapons, that it can fight forever, but his own military leaders are telling a very, very different story from the ground.
The cost has been just staggering, right from the very beginning. Just to get the aircraft carriers, the ships, and the air power into position for this operation, before a single shot was even fired, cost an estimated $1.5 billion. And the meter is just running and running.
And this really gets to the heart of the issue. This has turned into a war of attrition. Iran is firing a huge number of relatively cheap ballistic missiles. But see, defending against them requires these incredibly expensive interceptors. The math is just brutal. At the rate they're going, Qatar is projected to be defenseless in 4 days, the UAE in just a week. This is forcing the U.S. to pull its missile defense systems from other critical spots, like Ukraine and the Indo-Pacific, which, just creates new problems all over the globe.
All right, let's pivot to our fourth question, because this one adds a whole new layer of mystery and danger to the crisis. We're talking about a mysterious attack on Saudi Arabia's most important oil infrastructure that could just change this entire game.
At first, everyone pointed the finger straight at Iran. It seemed obvious. But as Riyadh is investigating, it's starting to look like Iran might not have launched the strike that crippled that huge Aramco facility. So, if it wasn't them, who was it?
So, two main theories are floating around. The first one, the obvious one, is that Iran or one of its proxy groups did it to punish Saudi Arabia. But a second, much more explosive theory is that this might have been a false flag operation, an attack that's designed to look like somebody else did it. And in this scenario, the suspect is Israel. The alleged motive? To force Saudi Arabia's hand, basically leaving them with no choice but to jump into the war against Iran. If that turns out to be true, the entire dynamic of this war just flips on its head overnight.
And while the whole region is just holding its breath, the global economy is already feeling the squeeze. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has effectively blockaded the Strait of Hormuz, choking off 21 million barrels of oil every single day. The fallout is immediate. Gas prices in Europe have shot up 50%, and analysts are now warning that Brent crude could hit $150 a barrel. The world's oil tap is basically being turned off.
And all of this brings us to the final and, let's be honest, the most critical question. The U.S. has kicked down the door to war, but it seems like nobody ever made a plan for how to close it again.
Right now, America's facing two really grim choices. Option A is total annihilation, a long, bloody, and ridiculously expensive air campaign to hunt down every last missile launcher hidden away in Iran's mountains. Option B is to negotiate. But negotiate with who? The initial U.S. strike took out Iran's central leadership, leaving this decentralized, chaotic command structure behind. Even Iran's own foreign minister admits their military units are basically off the leash. There's no one to call to get a ceasefire.
And this is why Iran, strangely enough, holds a lot of the cards right now. They are masters of what's called asymmetric warfare. They know they can't win a straight-up fight, so they use drones, missiles, and proxy forces to just inflict constant pain, to bleed a military superpower dry. A wounded, insulted Iran has absolutely zero reason to come to the table. As long as it can still launch missiles, it has literally nothing left to lose.
So, when you put all the pieces together, the picture is just bleak. America has stumbled into a war without a clear objective against an enemy using a playbook it wasn't ready for, with its allies getting nervous, and with no clear way to win or to get out. It has, for all intents and purposes, trapped itself.
Which leaves us with one last thought. You know, we've seen this movie before, in Iraq, in Libya, in Afghanistan. When a war is started with shifting goals and no real exit strategy, who is it that always pays the highest price for that kind of miscalculation?